If you're like me and you've noticed that Netflix has not really been adding a lot of stuff over the past few months, well, that all changes here in September, where they're adding a ton of stuff, the most I've seen them add all year. That's right, on this video, I've got about 40 titles coming to Netflix this month, many of them for the first time, half of them brand spanking new releases. This video is sponsored by Sundays for Dogs, but I'll tell you more about them later in the video. Right now, let's talk about all the stuff they're adding on September 1st, which is where they're adding most of the stuff you're familiar with, as well as a few new releases. In the drama category, they're adding Public Enemies, one of the last really good movies directed by Michael Mann, and one of the last really good movies starring Johnny Depp, for that matter. In this movie, he plays John Dillinger, and not only is the movie fairly accurate all the way throughout, there is a particular prison escape sequence that was actually filmed in the same prison John Dillinger escaped from, and it's all done to a T. There's also an exceptional shootout in this movie. Michael Mann is just great with those, and you get a pretty good role from Christian Bale in this movie as well. So this one is one of my top picks for the month, along with a couple of war movies, including Hacksaw Ridge, the last movie directed by Mel Gibson. And while it's not his best job in the director's chair, this is a phenomenal story. And it is well directed, it's just not a banger like Braveheart or Apocalypto. In fact, the way he directed this movie is a little bit more straightforward. There's not a whole lot of style to this movie, and honestly, that kind of helps elevate this pretty amazing story even further. Another amazing World War II movie that I have not seen in forever is U-571. This is an exceptional film. I would imagine most people watching this video have seen it, but I promise you've forgotten how good this movie actually is. It's packed with action, the story's incredible, the performances are great, it's full of tension, it's just top-notch stuff. Another one of my top picks for the month. They're also adding the amazing sci-fi flick Arrival. This is from the same director as Dune and Blade Runner 2049, and while it is obviously a sci-fi movie, it does play out much more like a drama, and the drama in this movie is really heavy, and the final moments of the movie are so impactful. It has a truly unique setup and premise, making it one of the more interesting alien movies to have been released in the past decade. An underrated pick is Snitch, starring The Rock. This is one of his earlier big leading roles, and it's a pretty decent crime movie, even for a kind of PG-13 one. Meaning it's a little by the book, it's a little vanilla, the action's a little neutered because of that PG-13 rating, but if you somehow miss this one, it'll make a good Netflix watch. 8 Mile is an exceptional film. I would imagine every single Eminem fan in the world has seen this movie at least twice, but if you were not a fan of his and had no interest in it, it is still an exceptional film. It's really well written and directed, surprisingly so. He actually does a pretty good job acting, but Brittany Murphy really stands out in this movie as one of her greatest roles before she died. Speaking of directors, Denzel Washington actually directed my next pick, Fences. He also stars in it as a working-class father in 1950s America. Viola Davis stars in this as well, and while Denzel Washington is not a famous director, he did direct multiple movies, including The Great Debaters and Antoine Fisher, so if you're a fan of his style, definitely check out Fences. It's only a few years old. And finally, in the drama category, again, we're just talking about the older movies they're adding on September 1st. They're also adding Up in the Air, starring George Clooney, which kind of doubles as a comedy. It's got some really nice elements to it, but it's also just a fantastic drama that, again, just is way better than you would expect. They're also going to be adding some classic movies this month, which is not something Netflix typically does for some ridiculous reason, but in September, they're adding Stand By Me, a classic that everybody loves. It's one of the greatest coming-of-age stories in movie history, in my opinion, and if you've got young kids that are old enough to watch a movie about kids trying to find a dead body, then this is going to be a top pick for you this month. They're also adding Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner, another just beautiful classic. Baseball lovers, I'm sure you've seen it, but this is one of those movies that is well worth rewatching. And then they're adding a huge collection of Jaws movies that include every single Jaws movie except for the best one, the original. I don't know why. The second one being pretty decent, the third being pretty terrible, and the fourth being actually famously one of the worst movies ever made. So terrible, in fact, that you could watch Jaws: The Revenge as a comedy movie and honestly have a blast. And then finally, in the classics category, they're adding The Deer Hunter, which I don't know that I've ever seen this movie available on Netflix. It is a Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken Vietnam War classic. If you've never seen the movie, odds are you've seen it parodied, and this is one of those movies that movie buffs really do need to see. It is very long-winded, so make sure you got plenty of time to watch it, but it is well worth it. Now, in the comedy category, still, we're talking about the stuff they're adding right there on September 1st. They're going to be adding Disenchantment Part 5, which is an adult animated series from the same creators as The Simpsons and Futurama. I mean, it has a cult following, and this will be the 5th and final season.
The worst is yet to come.
Some other comedies they're going to be adding include Land of the Lost with Will Ferrell and Danny McBride. While I think they're two of the funniest people in movies, this is certainly not one of their funniest movies, but still kind of a fun watch. But they're also adding Superbad, a movie I consider to be one of the funniest movies of the 21st century so far. And when I say one of, I mean, it might actually be the funniest. And it's mainly just from the dialogue, which is just rapid fire jokes for an hour and a half. And most of them are not very topical for the time. They still hold up. It's just a real gem of a movie that I've just never gotten tired of.
I love you. I love you. Why don't we say that every day? Why can't we say it more often?
I just want to go to the rooftops and scream, I love my best friend Evan.
Boop. Another high school coming-of-age party movie, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Certainly one of the better movies in that genre from the 80s. In fact, Fast Times and Superbad would make a killer double feature in September. And then some other comedies getting added right on the 1st include Miss Congeniality, Couples Retreat, and Baby Mama. Then finally, on the 1st, they're adding a bunch of movies and specials from One Piece, the animated franchise that just recently got a live-action adaptation on Netflix. So even if you're not an anime fan, if you got into the One Piece series, which again just dropped at the end of August, then you might want to check out some of the other specials that they're adding on the 1st. So before telling you about all the new stuff Netflix is adding, I do want to introduce you to my dog, Peanut. She's very elderly. She's over 100 years in dog years, and today's sponsor, Sundays, actually saved her life. So about a year ago, Peanut just stopped digesting her food well, and we really, with her age, thought her days were numbered, but I started feeding her Sundays for Dogs, which is actually air-dried dog food that is just packed with natural ingredients and human-grade meat, meaning it's safe for you and I to eat. Peanut loves the way it tastes, and she's digesting it better than she has anything else. It really is fantastic, and I know she's getting the nutrition that she needs. And it's 90% meat, 10% vegetables, a very short list of ingredients, which I think is great, and it's all human-grade food, but the best thing is that it's air-dried, which means it's shelf-stable, and there's no messy prep. You're not having to keep it in the fridge. It's not going to expire quickly. And Sundays can deliver this right to your door for 40% less than a lot of those other fresh dog food brands because they don't have to worry about refrigeration, keeping it cool in the shipment. They only have to focus on quality ingredients. And my viewers can save an additional 35% off their first order when they go to sundaysfordogs.com/flick. Again, that's an extra 35% off your first order. It's a fantastic deal, and all you got to do is use my link in the video description or just type in sundaysfordogs.com/flick. Sundays really is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to take better care of your dog. But speaking of great stuff, let's talk about the rest of the stuff coming to Netflix this month. Now, on the 3rd, they rev things up a bit with Crank, starring Jason Statham, and Crank 2 High Voltage, starring Jason Statham. I love these movies, particularly the second one. Honestly, they're very similar in a lot of ways, and the second movie just ramps things up to an insane level. It's way over the top in almost every aspect imaginable. There's sex that's over the top, the action's over the top, the camera movements are wild, but this movie is completely self-aware and never forgets that it's just trying to have a fun time making an action movie. I'm so disappointed we didn't get a third movie out of this because I felt like it could have been even wilder and more over the top, kind of a Dark Man type of an action movie, but it didn't happen. As it stands, these two are available on the 3rd, and again, some of my top picks for the month, even though they're absolutely bonkers. Then on the 5th, they're adding a new comedy special from Shane Gillis. If you didn't know, he was famously let go from Saturday Night Live just 2 weeks after being hired and has now just launched into kind of an insane stand-up comedy career. In fact, his last special is free right here on YouTube. I'll put a link to it down in the top pinned comment, which is where you can find the full list of all the titles we're talking about.
Or as my dad likes to call it, Medea Goes to the Moon.
And then for some added comedy on the 5th, they're also adding Anchorman 1 and 2. The second one I just really couldn't get into, but the first still holds up as one of Will Ferrell's best.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
Then on the 6th, we get something interesting. It's a new nature documentary titled Predators, but this one is actually narrated by Tom Hardy, which if you think about it, his voice is perfect for a nature doc about predators. Virgin River returns for Season 5, Part 1. Not a recommendation from me. This is not a show I watch, but I do know some of my viewers watch it, so I wanted to at least let you know that the final season, at least the first half of the final season, is coming soon. And then for those of you like me that don't watch Virgin River, on the 12th, they're going to be adding The Wolf of Wall Street, one of the wildest movies ever directed by Martin Scorsese, and that man has done some pretty wild movies. Not only is the story of Jordan Belfort wild, and not only does Leonardo DiCaprio do a killer job in this movie, but it's so vibrant and fun and colorful and raunchy as all get out. Instead of taking a judgmental tone to the lifestyle Jordan Belfort lived, which is easy to do, the movie actually just kind of puts you in the passenger seat with him, and I think it was a brilliant move. And Scorsese and DiCaprio really did kind of a masterful job of bringing this story to life in a way that is just highly, highly rewatchable. On the 13th, they add a docu-series about wrestlers. While they're pro wrestlers, these are wrestlers in the Ohio Valley Wrestling Group. If you didn't know, there are smaller wrestling groups like this all over the country, all over the world probably, but they don't get a whole lot of camera time, so this is a docu-series that should be interesting certainly for wrestling fans, but even if you're not into the sport, which honestly I'm not, this could make for a pretty entertaining docu-series. On the 15th, they're adding something they've never added before. They're adding Band of Brothers and The Pacific, two productions from HBO that do have some years on them now, almost 20 years, or at least close to that for Band of Brothers, but they're amazing productions. It is a movie quality series where each episode has a new director, sometimes completely new characters, and between the two different series, you really do get an amazing view of America in World War II. I realize there was a lot of other things going on, but for these, you follow American soldiers, and again, this is just top-notch stuff on the level of Saving Private Ryan, yet you've got two series, you've got almost 20 hours of content with these two getting added to Netflix this month. I'm so excited to see Netflix add things like this. I think this is the type of stuff that they need to be adding, not just Band of Brothers, but all the cool stuff they're adding this month. This is a real stellar month, and I want to see more like this from you, Netflix. Now, they are adding a handful of romantic comedies this month, most of them brand new Netflix originals, and I just don't have a taste for those, so I don't like recommending them, but one of the better ones that they are adding this month is My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. A funny movie, if nothing else.
Take a photo! All right, pull my neck. 1, 2, pull!
But if you do like those rom-coms, they are going to be bringing back Love is Blind for Season 5. Now, I'll admit I watched and thoroughly enjoyed Season 1, but I got my fill of it with that one season. However, if you're still watching it, they're adding the 5th season on the 22nd. They're also going to be adding the After the Altar series, where you get to see what happens with these people after they get married, even though odds are it's not going to work out for most of them. And then, one of my favorite directors, Robert Rodriguez, has a new Netflix original movie, but pump your brakes a little bit, it is a kids movie. In fact, it's a brand new Spy Kids movie, Spy Kids Armageddon. And while the Spy Kids movies are not cinematic masterpieces, they're really fun family movies with lots of action that is not inappropriate for young kids. He really does reach for the brass ring with these movies and just packs a lot into them, and again, makes them just really fun to watch with the family. So if you've got kids, nieces, nephews, make sure to watch this one when it comes out. And then on the 22nd, we get another top pick from me, or at least one I'm very excited about. is called Song of the Bandits. It's a new action series from South Korea that's actually a period piece. From what I understand, this takes place in a period between 1910 and 1945, and I'm really unaware of Korea's history, at least during this time period. So it'll be interesting to see that, but this series looks like it is absolutely packed with action, and looks like it's got a pretty good English dub as well, so this one is on the top of my list for the month. And then on the 27th, another incredible project that kind of sums up what I love personally about Netflix. It's a new Wes Anderson short titled The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. Now, this is based on a story by Roald Dahl. In fact, my understanding is Wes Anderson did a short series of these short films, this first one being the longest, at about 40 minutes, which actually stars Ben Kingsley, Ralph Fiennes, Benedict Cumberbatch. And then before telling you about everything leaving in the month of September, so you can be sure to catch those titles before they're gone, they're going to be adding a movie titled Nowhere that looks particularly interesting. At the time of me recording this, we've only got a teaser trailer and a couple of images, but this is about a pregnant woman who stows away in a shipping container and then becomes lost at sea, where she has to deliver her baby and live inside this shipping container. Now, this movie is from Spain, but I love a lot of the Netflix originals that come from Spain, and they typically have pretty good English dubs as well. But here is everything leaving in the month of September. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Definitely consider clicking that subscribe button, but the date listed is the date it is gone, which means you need to watch it prior to the date I'm showing you. I did put a few titles in bold here. These are titles that I've recommended pretty strongly here on the channel in the past. Thanks again to Sundays for Dogs for sponsoring the video. Be sure to go check out their link in the video description below. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Netflix episode, and you will see me on the next one.